On this journey to Christmas and the birth of the child Jesus, there are a great many people who appear in this unfolding drama. It was Mary who had started the story of salvation when she had said yes to the angel who had appeared to her. Mary chose to become the mother of Jesus, Son of God, with all of the challenges and difficulties that such a role would bring to her. Yet still, Mary would say yes to that invitation from God. Time would move on, and through the unfolding journey of our Advent story, we then met John the Baptist, that wild man of the desert, whose mission was to call all people to get ready. Prepare the way of the Lord, he had told them. Here too, John, called by God, would also respond to that invitation. He too would say yes to that call. Then finally, on this fourth week of Advent, we meet Joseph. Now, Joe was a man of honour who was faithful to the religious traditions of his people. So when he found out his betrothed was with child, he decided to bring the relationship to an end, quietly, without any embarrassment to Mary. But this was not to be, because God had chosen Joseph for the role that would be his in this unfolding drama. One quiet night, as Joseph lay sleeping, the angel of the Lord came to him and invited Joseph to do something quite radical. "Do not be afraid," the angel said to him. "Take Mary home as your wife." And Joseph said yes. Once again, it was to be an ordinary person such as Joseph, this carpenter from Nazareth, who would be asked then to be husband and father. Again, with all of the challenges that such a role would bring to him. And yet, like Mary and like John the Baptist, Joseph, in his own way, accepted the challenge of this role that he would undertake. It was out of that simple dream where the angel of the Lord had spoken to Joseph that this would be his time to shine. Joseph chose to act in the best way that was possible. He married Mary and welcomed her and her unborn child into his home as family. The Holy Family would then be formed for the salvation of the world. Joseph had accepted this role that had been offered to him, and he would indeed become husband to Mary and father to her unborn child, with all of the responsibilities that such a role would bring. Yet in spite of this commitment to the mission that had been thrust upon him at that time, Joseph never speaks. All that takes place for him at that moment does so in those moments of silence. The angel appeared to him in the silence of his dreams, and he called Joseph to choose another path from what he had decided. "Take Mary home as your wife," the angel said. And when Joseph woke from his dream, he simply acted. Nothing is said. Joseph never speaks to say yes to the invitation. He simply hears the word of God spoken to him in that silent moment, and then he would choose to act. It was then he would respond to the invitation that was offered to him. He chose to accept the role of husband to Mary and father then to Jesus. There may be times for us too when we hear those quiet whispers from our God in those moments of silent prayer. It may be even in those dream states when we're neither awake nor asleep, and we can't be sure just what we heard for ourselves. But it may be at that moment when God speaks to us, that moment when God calls us to accept a particular mission within our lives, just as Joseph had been invited to his own particular ministry for Mary and for Jesus. Because of his commitment to that invitation, Joseph, in his own way, would also seem to become God-bearer for the world. He accepted the role as father to Jesus, Son of God and Son of Mary and Joseph. And perhaps that had made all the difference. So for us today, as people of faith, there is so much that can be achieved when we choose to accept that call to mission and ministry within our lives, whatever that may be. It may be a simple task of welcome and hospitality to others here in our church community. It may be in the ministry of outreach to those who are sick, to the elderly or housebound, or to those in our society who are poor or have no voice. But it may be other areas of ministry to which God may call any one of us, or perhaps God may call all of us. And it's in that silent moment of prayerful reflection that God does speak to us and calls us to use our particular gifts and talents to become the minister of God's kingdom in our world today. Joseph had said yes to the call. Mary had said yes to the call. And in their own ways, they would shine for the world. And it was from their response that God's plan of salvation would continue to unfold in our world at that time. That same plan of salvation is continuing to unfold here in our world today. But it's now not so much through the roles of Mary and Joseph that will enable that plan to unfold, but rather through you and me. We who now are God-bearers for our world. Now is the time for us to be willing to use our gifts and our talents to make a difference by our lives. Now is the time for us to truly shine for our world. And all it takes is one simple word: yes.